The heavy mahogany doors of the university club didn't just open for me that night. They parted like a curtain on a stage one never asked to step onto. I smoothed the lapels of my simple navy suit, nothing flashy. Just tailored, classic, the kind of thing I wear in chambers every day, and took a deep breath. This was supposed to be a celebration. My son Ethan's engagement party. A night to smile, raise a glass, and watch the boy I raised alone step into the next chapter of his life. But before I could even cross the marble lobby, a harried floor manager in a crisp black suit rushed up to me. Eyes flicking nervously to his watch. He pressed a starched white apron into my hands. "You're late," he whispered sharply. "Kitchen's to the left. Tray service starts in 5. I opened my mouth to correct him, to tell him I wasn't staff. That I was the mother of the groom, but then I heard it. A voice I'd only ever heard in depositions and pretrial conferences. Deep, commanding, laced with entitlement. Grant Hawthorne. He was standing by the coat check, loud enough for half the lobby to hear. "If Ethan's mother shows up looking like she just came from scrubbing floors," he said with a chuckle, "do me a favor and keep her away from the partners. We can't have someone who looks like the help mingling with federal judges and Supreme Court clerks." My fingers tightened around the apron. I could have pulled out my judicial credentials right then. I could have said something, cleared my throat, made a scene. But I didn't. Instead, I looked down at the crisp white fabric in my hands, and I smiled. Small, cold, controlled. "Right away, sir," I murmured to the manager, tying the apron strings around my waist with deliberate calm. In my courtroom, silence is a strategy. You let the other side talk long enough, feel safe enough, and they'll hang themselves every single time. Tonight, I decided, would be no different. I didn't feel humiliated. I didn't feel small. I felt something sharper, clearer. Like a predator stepping quietly into tall grass. This wasn't just an engagement party anymore. It was evidence collection. And I had just gone undercover. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. I read every single one. Truly. Now, let me tell you what happened when the mother of the groom became invisible. I stepped through the double doors into the ballroom, and the noise hit me like a wave, the low hum of privileged conversation. The clink of crystal, the soft swell of a string quartet playing something tasteful and expensive. With the apron tied snug around my waist, something shifted, instantly. I've spent years studying human behavior from the bench, how people relax when they think no one important is watching. Tonight, I became the gray rock. Dull, unremarkable, invisible. I lowered my eyes just enough, kept my posture neutral, and balanced a silver tray of champagne flutes on one hand. The elite of Manhattan swirled around me. But they didn't see a woman. They saw furniture, a prop that poured drinks and disappeared. And because they felt so safe, they let their guards down completely. Across the room, beneath the glow of a massive chandelier, I spotted Ethan, my boy, tall and handsome in his tailored tuxedo, standing beside the champagne tower, looking proud but anxious. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on me. His face changed in an instant, confusion, then recognition, then the beginnings of alarm. He took half a step forward, mouth opening. "Mom." I didn't smile, I didn't wave. I gave him the look. The same one I use in court when a defendant is about to lose control, a tiny shake of the head. Eyes narrowing just enough to say, "Trust me, stand down, let this play out." Ethan froze, then he understood. He'd grown up watching me navigate tough rooms with nothing but quiet authority. He closed his mouth, nodded almost imperceptibly, and stepped back into the shadow of a marble pillar. "Good boy." I moved slowly along the edges of the crowd, refilling glasses, staying on the perimeter, closer and closer to the Hawthorns. Grant Hawthorne stood near the orchestra like he owned the room, which, in his mind, he probably did, scotch in hand, gesturing broadly, voice carrying over the music. His daughter Charlotte, my son's fiancée, floated beside him in a gown that cost more than most people's yearly salary. Silk and subtle diamonds, armor, really. I watched her snap her fingers at a passing busboy for an empty glass, no eye contact. No thank you, just expectation. Grant laughed, loud and smug. "We're lucky to even consider this alliance." He boomed to his circle of partners. "Ethan's sharp, no doubt, but let's be real, he's marrying way up, We're practically running a charity here. A few polite chuckles rippled through the group. Heat flashed across my chest, but I folded it away. Evidence, that's all this was now. Discovery phase. I drifted closer, tray steady, voice soft and stripped of everything that might betray an education or authority. More scotch, sir? Grant didn't even glance at my face. He flicked his wrist like he was shooing a fly. Keep it coming, and try not to spill on the shoes, they're Italian. Of course, sir, I whispered, and walked away. They thought I was serving drinks. In reality, I was handing them rope. And they were tying the noose all by themselves. I slipped back through the service door for a moment, just to breathe. The corridor was quiet, cool, smelling faintly of lemon polish and hot food. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. That apron, it didn't make me feel small. It took me straight back. 30 years ago, I wasn't wearing a judicial robe. I was pushing a mop bucket through the night shift halls of the Bronx courthouse. Textbooks propped open on top of wet floor signs, stealing minutes to study between trash runs. I learned the law while cleaning up after the people who practiced it. My hands were rough then, calloused. I sent every extra dollar to Ethan's school fund, skipped vacations, worked doubles so he could have the chances I never did. Grant Hawthorne looked at a server and saw failure. I looked at one and saw the quiet hunger that builds empires. That's why I didn't rip the apron off in the lobby. It wasn't humiliation. It was reminder. It was fuel. I straightened the strings, took a slow breath, and pushed the doors open again. Time to go back in. I wasn't just carrying a tray anymore. I was collecting receipts. The ballroom felt warmer now, thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the faint tang of ambition. I moved like a quiet current through the crowd, tray balanced, eyes down, but every sense wide open. Grant Hawthorne had migrated to the tall windows overlooking the city lights. A cluster of senior partners orbited him, all black tuxedos and practiced smiles. Charlotte stood at the center of it all, laughing just loud enough to draw attention, her gown catching every shard of light from the chandeliers. She looked like a bride to be should, radiant, confident, untouchable. But I saw the edges. I watched her signal a young server, Mia Reyes, her name tag read, who was carrying a tray of delicate hors d'oeuvres. Mia approached carefully, polite, waiting for a pause in the conversation. Ma'am, would you care for? Charlotte spun around so fast her diamonds flashed like warning lights. No, she snapped, voice slicing clean through the music. Absolutely not. I specifically told the coordinator no shellfish anywhere near the bridal party. Do you not understand allergies? Or are you just incompetent? Mia's cheeks flushed deep red. Her grip tightened on the tray. I'm so sorry. Miss, I didn't know. Clearly, Charlotte cut in, nasal and cold. Just take it away before you ruin everything. Mia turned too quickly. In her rush, her hip brushed a nearby high-top table. One champagne flute teetered, tipped, and spilled a small splash across the marble floor. Nothing dramatic, barely a few drops, certainly nowhere near Charlotte's gown. But you'd have thought the ceiling had collapsed. Grant's head snapped around. He let out a loud, barking laugh. Unbelievable, he boomed, turning to the partners for approval. You see this, gentlemen? This is exactly why we paid for the premium package. To keep the riffraff at bay. Good help really is extinct these days. The men chuckled uncomfortably. Ethan, standing a few feet away, went rigid. I saw his jaw tighten. Saw him take a half step forward like he was about to speak. Charlotte placed a possessive hand on his arm and gently pulled him back, silencing him without a word. That was the moment something inside me settled, cold and certain. I didn't think, I just moved. I set my tray down quietly and knelt on the cool marble beside Mia. She looked down at me, eyes wide with panic, tears already gathering. I'm going to get fired, she whispered, voice shaking. You won't, I said softly, pulling a clean cloth from my apron pocket. It's just a little spill. Honey, it wipes right up. I dabbed at the floor slowly, deliberately. From down here, on my knees, the view was perfect. Charlotte towered above us in her designer gown, sipping her drink, looking down with a faint, satisfied smirk. She thought height made her powerful. She thought standing while I knelt proved something. She didn't understand the oldest truth about real power. True strength doesn't need to stand on anyone else to feel tall. It lifts others up. I finished cleaning, folded the cloth, and stood. For just a second, my eyes met Charlotte's. Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe the first hint that the woman in the apron wasn't quite what she seemed. But she recovered quickly. About time, she muttered, turning her back on me. I picked up my tray again and walked away. But the trial in my head was already over. The verdict on her character had been delivered. Now I just needed the right moment for sentencing. And I knew exactly where to find it. I traded the tray of hors d'oeuvres for a bottle of vintage champagne and drifted toward the far corner of the room, where the real power had gathered. The senior partners stood in a tight circle, backs to the party, voices low but carrying that unmistakable hush of men discussing things that move billions. This wasn't small talk, this was the kill. I approached slowly, cloth over my arm, head slightly bowed, invisible again. Grant Hawthorne was in the center, swirling his scotch like he was conducting an orchestra. The Vortex Atlantic merger is locked in. Gentlemen, he said, voice rich with triumph. 45 billion, biggest payout this firm's seen in a decade. A younger partner shifted, looking uneasy. The DOJ's all over it. Grant, and the case just landed on Judge Ellison's docket in the Second Circuit. I've heard she's thorough. My hand stayed perfectly steady as I tilted the bottle and filled his glass to the exact rim. Not a drop spilled. Grant let out a low, dismissive laugh. Ellison, he said, drawing my name out like it tasted funny. Naomi Ellison, please. Diversity hire with a soft spot for sob stories. Spent half her career in family court worrying about feelings. She's not built for fiscal quarters this size. The circle relaxed. A few smirks. Another partner pressed, quieter, but the environmental reports, the toxicity levels in the water table data. If she digs into those. Grant took a slow sip. She won't, he said simply. We made sure of it. The air tightened. Someone whispered, we're not shredding them, are we? Grant scoffed, we're not amateurs. We buried them, right in the middle of Discovery, box 3870. Sandwiched between cafeteria receipts and parking logs. 2 million pages total. She's a federal judge with a docket the size of Manhattan. She doesn't have the staff, the time, or frankly the brains to find the one chart that matters. A soft chorus of relieved laughs. We steamroll her, Grant concluded, raising his glass. Big words, deep piles, and we walk out with 45 billion. To Vortex Atlantic, the men murmured, clinking quietly. I stepped back into the shadows. The cold bottle pressed against my apron. In my head, I wasn't holding champagne anymore. I was drafting an order to show cause. Spoliation of evidence, conspiracy to defraud the court. Confessed freely, in a crowded room, to the very judge they planned to deceive. I could have ended it right there. But Grant wasn't finished. He slung an arm around the nearest partner, voice dropping into that oily, boastful tone men use when alcohol loosens their tongues. And it's not just the firm winning tonight, he said, gesturing across the room toward Charlotte. My daughter just secured the summer associate slot at the Solicitor General's office in D.C. Eyebrows rose. Impressive murmurs. That program takes what, 3, maybe 4 a year? Someone asked. Top 1% of the Ivies. Usually. Grant chuckled, low and smug. Let's just say the selection committee suddenly remembered how much they appreciated the new library wing I funded. A few administrative adjustments were made. Adjustments? He waved a hand. There was some girl from a state school. Perfect LSAT. Apparently a real grinder, but no pedigree, no connections to actually use a slot like that. So, her application got misplaced. My blood turned to ice. I glanced instinctively toward the service door. There was Mia Reyes, on her 5-minute break, sitting on an overturned crate in the dim hallway, a thick LSAT prep book open on her lap. Pages worn, margins crammed with careful notes in cheap ink. Everything clicked into place with the sharp finality of a gavel striking wood. Mia wasn't just the server Charlotte humiliated. She was some girl, whose dream they stole. The one who worked double shifts, studied until her eyes burned, earned every point on that test through sheer will, only to have it taken by people who treated opportunity like a party favor. This wasn't a social slight anymore. This was theft. Of a life, of a future. I set the champagne bottle down on a side table with a soft, deliberate thud. Discovery was complete. I had motive, method, confession. All of it. I slipped my phone from my apron pocket, fingers steady, and opened a contact I hadn't needed in years. Senator Daniel Whitaker. Oldest friend from law school. Tonight's keynote speaker. I typed 2 short lines. Code blue. Kitchen side entrance. Need a witness. Send. I wasn't the mother of the groom anymore. I was the Honorable Naomi Ellison. And court was about to come into session. The kitchen doors swung open with a heavy thud that cut through the ballroom chatter like a gavel. Senator Daniel Whitaker stepped into the frame. Tall and unmistakable, flanked by 2 discreet security agents. Every head in the room turned. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Grant Hawthorne's face lit up with pure opportunism. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket, took 2 eager steps forward, hand already extended. Senator, what an honor. Daniel Whitaker walked straight past him without a glance. He didn't slow, didn't acknowledge the outstretched hand hanging awkwardly in the air. He walked directly to me, standing by the service station in my white apron, holding a folded cloth, and his deep voice carried across the sudden hush of the room. Judge Ellison, he said, warm but loud enough for everyone to hear. Why on earth are you wearing an apron tonight? The silence that followed was absolute. The kind that presses against your eardrums. Grant's hand slowly dropped to his side. His face drained from flushed confidence to ashen gray in seconds. Charlotte's champagne glass tilted dangerously in her frozen fingers. I reached behind my back, untied the apron strings with calm, deliberate movements, pulled the fabric over my head, and folded it once, twice, neatly. Then I laid it on the tray beside the empty flutes. I smoothed the lapels of my navy suit and looked up. The room was watching. Waiting. I didn't raise my voice. I never have to. Actually, Miss Hawthorne, I said, my words clear and steady enough to reach the back wall. I am the Honorable Naomi Ellison, presiding judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, the very court currently reviewing your father's $45 billion Vortex Atlantic merger. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Grant made a strangled sound. Judge Ellison, we had no idea. This is clearly a misunderstanding. We were only. I stepped forward. He instinctively stepped back. Was it a misunderstanding? I asked quietly. When you admitted, in detail, to a conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act? When you described burying critical toxicity reports in box 3870 of Discovery, surrounded by cafeteria receipts, because you believed the assigned judge wouldn't have the time, or the intellect, to find them? His mouth opened, closed, no sound came out. That conversation, I continued, took place in a crowded room. In front of waitstaff you dismissed as unimportant. There is no privilege when you confess federal crimes to a server who happens to be the presiding judge. And certainly none when a United States senator is now standing witness. I nodded toward Daniel, who crossed his arms and fixed Grant with a stare that could freeze fire. Grant's knees looked unsteady. I turned to Charlotte. Her perfect posture had crumbled. She looked suddenly very young, very small. And as for the Solicitor General's summer associate position, I said, watching the color leave her face, I sit on the Oversight Committee. We take integrity very seriously. I'll be reviewing your file first thing tomorrow morning, particularly the part about how another candidate's application was misplaced to make room for you. Charlotte reached blindly for her mother's arm. Mom. Her mother stared at the floor, silent. I turned finally to Ethan. He had stepped out from the shadows. No more anxiety in his eyes. Just clarity, relief. He walked straight to me and stood at my side. Ready to go, Mom? He asked softly. One last thing. I looked back at Grant, who was trembling now. You were right about one thing tonight, Mr. Hawthorne, I said. You really should be careful who you speak in front of. A pause, just long enough for the words to land. You never know when the person you call, the help, might be the one holding the gavel. I turned on my heel. Ethan offered his arm. I took it. Together, we walked out. The heavy doors closed behind us with a soft, final click. We didn't stay for dessert. By the time the staff began wheeling out the elaborate cake, Ethan and I were already in a cab heading uptown. My heels kicked off on the floor mat, phone in hand, drafting notes for the affidavit I'd file first thing Monday morning. The fallout came faster than even I expected. It wasn't a scandal, it was a collapse. 3 months later, the headlines still hadn't let go. Vortex Atlantic merger blocked by Second Circuit. Hawthorne and Partners faces federal investigation for evidence tampering. Grant Hawthorne didn't just lose the case. He lost the firm. When the Bar Association received the recorded statements, corroborated by a sitting U.S. Senator, his license was suspended pending disbarment. The partners scattered like smoke. Charlotte's world shrank overnight. The wedding was quietly cancelled. Last I heard, she was working retail in Soho as part of a community service requirement tied to a deferred prosecution agreement. She told Ethan once, over a stiff phone call, that her feet hurt at the end of every shift. He told her, gently, that pain can be a good teacher. Maybe, someday, she'll listen. But the real justice, the kind that settles deep in your bones, wasn't in watching the mighty fall. It was in what rose in their place. One quiet morning in chambers, sunlight pouring across the old mahogany desk, Ethan came to visit. He looked lighter than he had in years. Shoulders relaxed, eyes clear. He stirred his coffee slowly. She called yesterday, he said, meaning Charlotte, told me about her new job. Said standing all day is harder than she thought. I smiled, signing an order in front of me. Good, I said, some lessons only sore feet can teach. He laughed softly, then nodded toward the file on my desk. And the internship? I opened the top drawer and pulled out a crisp acceptance letter. That, I said, was the easiest ruling I've ever made. A week earlier, I'd found Mia Reyes in the public library near her apartment, buried under the same worn LSAT book. When I slid the official offer across the table, the Solicitor General's summer program. The one meant for her all along, she didn't scream or jump. She just cried. Quiet, shaking tears that come when someone who's been invisible for years suddenly realizes they've been seen. She starts in June. She didn't need a favor. She just needed the system to work the way it's supposed to. I stood at my chamber window that morning with Ethan, looking down at the city far below. All those glass towers built on money and influence. But the real city, the one that keeps everything running, was moving on the streets. The janitors heading to early shifts. The delivery workers, the servers, the invisible army holding the world together. I still keep that white apron. It's folded neatly in my closet at home, right beside my black judicial robe. Different uniforms. Same purpose. Grant Hawthorne thought power was about who you could look down on. He never understood that true power is measured by who you're willing to lift up. Justice is supposed to be blind. But she's not deaf. She hears everything. Especially the things people say when they think no one important is listening. If you believe a person's real character shows up when they think no one's watching, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you'd been in my shoes that night? Would you have stayed quiet and collected the receipts, or spoken up right away? I read every single one. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Until the next story, take care of yourselves. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the power.